Hello, it's Landon Nagati. I'm a member of Longline Cares and founder of Food Secure Future, a place for people of all ages and backgrounds to share ideas and learn about the most pressing food security issues. I'm here today with a special guest, Joseph Yoon, who is a world-renowned chef and founder of Brooklyn Bugs, a unique organization dedicated to promoting edible insects as a sustainable and nutritious food source. Mr. Yoon is a passionate advocate entomophagy, the practice of eating insects, and is on a mission to raise awareness about the benefits of incorporating insects into our diet. Mr. Yoon is a chef advocate for the United Nations International Fund for Agricultural Development and is leading global change as the culinary director for the Insects to Feed the World conference. Hello, Mr. Yoon. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Landon, thanks for having me.
So, my first question for you today is, how did you become interested in the concept of entomophagy?
Well, it originally started with an art project. And when I did some research on it, I came upon the UN's FAO report, Food and Agriculture Organization, Edible Insects, Future Prospects for Food and Feed Security. And in it, it addresses food security, sustainability, health and nutrition, workforce activation and livelihood, and environmentalism. And those are incredibly meaningful things to me. And so that was really my guiding North Star, my inspiration and motivation to really dedicate my life to this work that I started 7 years ago.
It's really cool. So, my next question is, can you share some insights into the sustainability benefits of incorporating insects into our diets compared to conventional livestock farming?
There are a lot of ways that this impacts our global food systems. But the top level, most basic, is that it requires far less resources to create an equivalent amount of protein with insects than it does traditional livestock. So if you compare like beef or pork or chicken, it takes far less feed, the amount of food that we actually feed the animal to produce an equivalent amount of protein, takes far less water, takes less space, creates less greenhouse gas emissions. And so, for those reasons, it's incredibly more sustainable to produce this. But on another side, we also have to take into account the idea of insect agriculture and the potential of this regenerative circular ag system and how it can be a part of our ag systems. And so when you take a look at the potential, you start with organic food waste management. We could take food waste from farms, from restaurants, from breweries, and even and bakeries, and we could feed them to insects, eliminating it from going into our landfills. And then two, we've passed legislation in America and Europe to be able to feed these insect larvae or insects to animals. So we can feed them, utilize them for animal feed, for pet food, for aquaculture, and we are decreasing the deforestation required to grow soy in the Amazon to for animal feed. And then if we're also creating all these metric tons of insects, something else to close the loop is that we could utilize the frass, which is the excrement created from all these insects. And it's also mixed with the exuviae, which is the exoskeleton of the insects. And this is incredibly efficient as a bioorganic fertilizer, mitigating the chemicals in our waste streams from traditional fertilizers. And it's also proven to be incredibly efficient at replenishing our soil health. So there's all these incredible benefits, and the animals themselves that are eating the insects are also healthier than if they were eating soy. And so there's a lot of different positive benefits in our food systems when you consider not just the human consumption of insects, but also insect agriculture as a whole.
Yeah, it seems like every really aspect of it is being taken advantage of and used efficiently. What insect in particular, is there a specific insect that is used mainly to farm, or is it multiple?
Depending on what region of the world, we have a lot of crickets that are being farmed for human consumption. And with regards to insect agriculture, the model I was speaking about before, that one is heavily focused on black soldier fly larvae. But there's also mealworms are also quite popular for this purpose, for the rearing and husbandry of insects for food. But then you also in traditional cultures, indigenous cultures in other areas of the world, The beetle larvae, the mealworm is a beetle larvae. That is also like that's actually one of the most commonly eaten insects in the world is a derivative of a beetle. But ants are really delicious, and they're also like grasshoppers and all manner of insects. I mean, there are over 2,000 species of edible insects, and they all have like such really unique and distinct flavor profiles and textures and functionality. And so it's like been really a great joy as a chef for me to be able to work with insects and knowing. So the fun part is really amazing because it's like, okay, I get to work with all these new ingredients with different flavors, but then also knowing about the sort of like the additional impact, like the wow, it is sustainable and incredibly nutrient dense, and all the plus side of everything else that really just brings me such great joy.
Yeah, sounds amazing. So my next question is, how do edible insects contribute to enhancing food security, especially in regions facing challenges with traditional protein sources?
So this is a little bit more of a complex question because I think that you bring up something that also needs to be addressed, which is the having the respect and dignity for the very practice of eating insects. Because we can't really address food security without having some semblance of dignity in what we eat. We can't just be like, oh, what you're hungry, and so why don't you just eat this? And so for a lot of people, they might be like, oh, they want us to eat insects because they don't know about the practice. And so before we even like crack the idea of food security through insects, I think it's important to mention that over 2 billion people around the world, represented by in over 80% of the world's nations, regularly consume insects. But something sad that's been happening is that because of globalization, it's casting shame on this very practice that we've had since really the beginning of human evolution. And so what we're seeing is that places that I've gone to around the world with a long history of eating insects now feel ashamed by it and are like, oh, no, we used to do that, or that's for poor, marginalized communities in rural areas, or that's in other areas of our country that's not what we do. So one, we really have to like address this and really make eating insects like amazing and fun and really normalize it. Raise the awareness and appreciation, raise the dignity of this very practice. And so that's one thing that we're working on. But two, if we're talking about the future, we're looking at a time where the insect agriculture will be growing and we'll be able to create a lot of insect protein in a more sustainable manner. Are we doing that right now? Well, we have massive far indoor vertical farms that are like rearing insects. However, could there be more? Absolutely. The big question really is like the demand of this on a global scale. And so when the time comes, and if we are successful, or rather, I should say, when we are successful at creating this change, then I think that we will really be able to like address food security and be able to make really delicious food that's respectful of cultures and really be able to offer this at scale in a manner that would be that would really be able to help food insecurity in a great way.
Yeah. How do you think we could overcome that boundary or that stigma that some people have towards insects?
Well, a lot of it is through outreach and education. At the end of the day, a lot of people that are scared about this is because of neophobia. They know nothing about it. They think they know insects because everyone knows what an insect is. And a lot of times they associate it as a pest, something that'll eat the plants in your garden, something that'll bite you, something that might carry disease or something. When in fact, these insects are a very small portion of the millions of insect species that exist. But we've identified a million. Scientists estimate there might be up to 5 million insects still out there. And so I think that what the really big thing is through educationally, we have to help people realize that the difference and distinction between insects as pests and edible insects, something that's sustainably farmed or harvested specifically for human consumption in America, that would be processed at an FDA approved facility, and that can be prepared in recognizable foods that can also really be delicious as well. And so a lot of it is really going to come through this educational sort of platform and really raising awareness and through exposure and through the availability so that we have these products available so that people can go to various places and be able to purchase them as well.
Yeah,
But
sounds
of course, it is a lot more complex than that, but that is like a somewhat of a simplified sort of answer for transforming a global mindset towards the acceptance of edible insects.
yeah. How do you think that governments and policymakers could implement insects consumption into mainstream?
Well, we're seeing a great deal of policy that's working towards insects in animal feed and pet food. And we're starting to see more regulations. However, edible insects aren't really addressed in a regulatory framework by the FDA. All the language right now is insects as pests. So you could have 100 bits of insects in your chocolate or coffee, ketchup, or they refer to it always in a negative manner. And so, what if they started creating the regulatory framework that allows for us to consider insects as food? Right now, the language that we go by is that, according to FDA guidelines, is that if something is reared for the purpose of human consumption and it's handled according to all the FDA guidelines at an FDA approved facility, and the scientific name is included in the packaging, then it is deemed as food. But we could use more guidelines and more of a regulatory framework. I'm really happy to be speaking at a FDA national convention this summer to address this. And I think a lot of our colleagues and I are working really towards advancing the policy and like really getting people to appreciate the distinction between insects and edible insects.
Yeah, it's great. Looking forward to the change. And thanks for doing
Yeah.
it, by the way.
Have you tried any edible insects, Landon?
So that was actually going to be one of my next questions, but I have tried crickets before, salt and vinegar crickets, and that's the only exposure I've had to edible insects, and they were really good.
Okay, yeah. Well, hopefully you'll be able to join for one of our events, or maybe we can like discuss some kind of programming with Long Island Cares.
That'd be great. So I was going to ask if, say, one of the viewers wanted to try some insects right now, what would be the best way to do that?
Well, first of all, it's like where are you going to get the insects? And so they're widely available online, and you can go to edibleinsects.com, Entomo Farms, or Three Cricketers. They're incredibly reliable vendors for a variety of edible insects. And I think that when someone thinks about what dish am I going to make with insects, what I like to think of is like, what is the best dish that you can make? What is your all-time wheelhouse dish? And then think about how you can incorporate insects into that dish. So just say that you make a really rockin' mac and cheese, then you could add like cricket powder to your cheese sauce, and then maybe like chop up some crickets and fry them up and turn them into cricket croutons to add on top. If you're making fried rice, maybe you could like add whole roasted crickets and then add that to your fried rice. I would just try to think about like what's your all-time dish and then think about like the substitutions that you can make to incorporate insects into them.
Sounds great. I would love to try and make some dishes with, I like to cook. I would love to try some dishes with any sort of insect, any way I can implement them.
Yeah, do
Yeah,
it. Send me a picture.
I
I'd love to
will.
see what you make.
All right, that's it for me. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, I think that this year is a particularly interesting year for edible insect lovers and science lovers because this is the year where brood 13 and 19 cicadas will converge. And this is a once in 221-year convergence. So the last time this happened was when this guy named Thomas Jefferson was president. And the thing that I'm really so excited about is that this opportunity presents a wonderful time to be able to share the great potential and ideas around why we're doing what we're doing with edible insects. Because there are a lot of news stories that are coming out about the fact that you can eat cicadas. And so I'm really looking forward. We're going to be in a lot of press over the next month or the next month and a half or so. And we're really excited to be able to like kind of share not just that like, oh, we could eat cicadas, but like why? Why should we even consider this? And so this is going to be a really exciting time for about 18 states. They're not going to be in New York, unfortunately, this year. The annual cicadas are different from the periodical cicadas. The annual cicadas are around every summer, but we're talking about the 13 and 17-year periodical cicadas that are going to converge this year.